Hey, Lux On Demand family. I am Pastor Andy, also known as Chino Mage, and I am super excited to welcome you to our YouTube channel. Now, normally we do live church services every single Wednesday night over at twitch.tv/Lux Digital Church, starting at 8:30 p.m. EST. It's a whole lot of fun getting the chance to talk with you live and really interact with you there. But our church mainly gathers on Discord, and you'll see the link below and in all of our profiles. We'd love to get the chance to hang out with you week in and week out. But for now, sit back and relax as we get ready for a new talk here on YouTube. Well, hello and welcome to Lux Digital Church. I am Andy, also known as Chino Mage, and I'm the creative pastor here. And it is so awesome that you are with us, either live on Twitch or on demand on YouTube or VOD or podcast at any other time. We are braving internet buffering things. We don't know what's going on here, but we're praying that we can kind of get through this evening. So stick around in chat, just hang out with us. If something breaks, something goes crazy, we're going to figure it out. Tech issues are a thing that happen. But man, we've got a living, breathing church community that's right here live on Twitch and also over on Discord right now. And we're living there like 24/7, 365 all the time, hanging out, playing games, sharing stories, praying for each other, really living together. And you are invited. You can hit !Discord in the chat right now to join our Discord, or you can click the link in the doodly-doos below me if you're watching this or listening to this later on. Seriously, it's like the best place to be on the internet. So please, please, please join us. We are working on internet. We're working on volume. We are going to get through tonight because, man, we have an important kind of step that we're taking this month. See, we've been talking about this ad nauseum, like over and over and over, but the emphasis this year at Lux is all about home. It's about looking at this church as not just a place to stop by for a little bit, but a community. It's a place of learning and growing and hanging out that you can call your place, you can call your home. And to do that, we've kicked off this year talking about the foundations of our home, the bones of it, the things that make it up. And we've been following this key statement that's been guiding us through this series. And that key statement is this: good bones will build a lasting home. See, Pastor Mark has been talking the last few weeks about the foundations of our home being in Jesus Christ and how our support structures are really our mission statement, that the one is greater than the 99. And next week, Pastor Dalton's going to be talking about the roof and kind of making a house comfortable with a place of togetherness, kind of safety, and all of our core values kind of culminating in this one: together is greater than alone. Hence, !Discord, by the way. But this week, I'm actually going to talk about something that's a little bit deeper in that home, something that goes to the functional kind of inner workings of what it means to have a working and functional home. I want to talk about the systems of a home. I want to talk about the rhythms that you must follow in order to keep a functioning house working. It's routine stuff, but it's also kind of some ways to suss out if there's an emergency coming that you need to fix. Now, up until I was about 30 years old or so, I was always renting places to live. I'd rent a dorm or an apartment or a house or like a really terrible studio apartment, and then I'd pay for a lease like most of you are right now, and then that lease would give me pest control. Sometimes I'd see a lot of cockroaches, but it'd give me pest control if, marginal. And then, someone would come and make a repair if something broke, or someone to keep the heating and cooling system maintained. And that's what you paid for in a lease, right? Theoretically, that's what you paid for in a lease. But then I met my wife, my beautiful, wonderful, amazing, Chino's favorite, who's in the chat right now. And this was, many, many years ago. I met my wife, we got married, and we did the thing that you do when you have kids. We saved up, and then we went and we bought a house. And that house was now ours. We didn't have to pay a lease to anybody. It was ours. We were making payments to the bank on a mortgage, and it was ours. And that meant we could do whatever we wanted to that house. But we now also had to do everything. We had to do all of the things that other people would do. And one of the things that they don't tell you about owning a house is that you have to fix everything. And there's always something to fix. Always. There's always some chore that you have to do around the house. Your house is actively trying to return to nature, especially in Florida, the wonderful, great state that I live in. Mother Nature is always trying to destroy our house. Most of this state is built on a sandbar in the ocean. We literally get sinkholes that just open up and swallow things. That's a legit thing that happens here in the state of Florida. And so part of the thing that we have to do, part of the fighting back against nature, is to make sure that our systems are up and running and that we're actually doing our chores. You have systems set up. You have a sprinkler system that sprays water on the grass so that the grass doesn't die, so it looks nice. So you don't get chinch bugs and you don't get all those things. But to make sure that system's running, you have to make sure your sprinkler heads aren't clogged and that they're aimed in the right direction. It's great, right? You have a refrigerator. Most of us have refrigerators, which are totally dope. They make sure you have cold food, like food that's not going to kill you and make you sick. But it only works if there's refrigerant and, if it's plugged in and the water lines and all those other things. You've got plumbing that makes sure that you aren't flooded out. You have to clean things in your house and you kind of have to keep them in working order. There's a pattern to making sure that things work. There's a rhythm to cleaning and maintaining and doing things around the house, or else the system breaks and you're in for some stupidly expensive repairs. I remember one 4th of July, this is a couple years ago, but we were at some big party thing with all of my family. It was great. It was a lot of fun. And we had all the brothers and sisters and all these other things and fireworks. And we did the thing. We had food and blew things up and all of that. And then we got home and it was like strangely hot in the house and the AC was not running. Now, the AC not being on in the dead of summer in July in Florida, that's a telltale sign. If you don't hear something, if you hear silence, you immediately go, ooh. But then I walked in and it was like humid and I went, oh, crap. It was just like that guttural, just like, oh crap, this is a holiday. That is the biggest danger sign you can have. And I walked upstairs to our utility closet, just over there, as a matter of fact, where our air handler, that big thing that forces air around, where it was. And I opened it up and there it was, a big puddle of water. Love it. See, the AC, the air conditioning unit, is probably the most vital system in a Florida house. It really is. Without AC, we might as well be living in one of the deeper levels of hell. There's no two ways about it. The way that an air conditioning unit works, we're going to have a little science lesson or mechanical lesson here. It pulls hot air from the house over some coils that have refrigerant kind of running in them. And then it does magic, and then it blows the cold air from that refrigerant back into your house, leaving you with a cold house. And then it takes that hot air and whooshes it outside the house. And that process is awesome, but it also usually leaves a ton of condensation because of the refrigerant. And usually we have that condensation and it drains through a series of PVC pipes. And it's great, and we don't ever have to worry about it. It goes outside, it waters the lawn and all those other things. But in Florida, we have this sort of like white slime that gathers in the drain lines. And if you've never seen it, I sent a picture to the team. Let's pull that picture up. There's like this white slime. It's like snot mixed with glue. And this is a legit thing that happens in drain lines in all of Florida. It's this slime that's just building up a bunch of bacteria. And if you don't get into the rhythm of pouring a cup of vinegar in these lines once a month to clean them, sometimes bleach, but mostly vinegar, because bleach will wreck your PVC pipes, the slime builds up. And over time, it actually stops the draining process. And then it backs up into your AC unit, and it literally can destroy it. Like that water that comes from your AC unit can literally destroy the AC unit. Literally, it can flood your AC handler and flood your room and make for some stupidly expensive repairs. And then you're going to be super uncomfortable for like 3 or 4 days. And air conditioning repairmen are going to come out and charge an arm and a leg because they can. And we came home to that on a holiday, which was just super rad. I was able to clean the line and get it draining again after a bunch of like really cursing, not some very not nice words, and stomping around in the dark. I had a headlamp on, and I was like, just saying a lot of things. But because I had fallen out of the rhythm of cleaning that line, like that's my chore around the house, and because I had fallen out of the rhythm of cleaning that line, it got bad. Now, we fixed it, and it was fine, and the carpet was fine, and everything ended up being fine. But it could have been a lot worse. See, when your systems are working well, your house is a safe place. It's a place of shelter and a place of rest. But when one of those systems isn't working, or if you haven't been maintaining those systems, well, they can take over everything. Now, I want you to keep that in mind as we peel back the layers on one of Lux's core values. Lux is a church. You know that. We are a digital church. We're a place where we worship the risen Jesus. But we're also a place of grace, and we're a place of love and true and honest community and connection and healing. And if you've experienced that as a part of our church family, then yes and amen. That's what we exist for. But when you hear the word church, a simple Google search will tell you that people don't think of church as the things of grace and love and mercy and connection and communication and community and all those things. They think of religion. And they think of dogma, and they think of prejudice, and they think of bigotry. They think of rules, not relationships and community. People think of obligations and things that you have to do in order to be loved and in order to be part of this family. They think of country clubs. They think of, legalism, this kind of rigorous keeping of rules. That's what you think of when you hear church. You automatically pair church and religion and go, well, I'm out. And this is something we actively try to avoid here at Lux, which is why one of our core values is rhythm is greater than religion. Rhythm is greater than religion. Now, that's not saying we value drum and bass music over everything else, although EDM has its place. Drum and bass has its place. But what we are saying is that the rhythms of our lives are so much more important than following any quote-unquote religion. The difference between empty religious obligations and the life-giving rhythms that God intended us to live in are vastly different. There are rhythms and systems all around us. They're happening all the time. You breathe in air, you take out the oxygen, and it goes into your blood. It's used for all sorts of things. You exhale the carbon dioxide, you breathe again, and the cycle repeats itself. It is called your cardiovascular system. We have rhythms in our seasons. They move from life to heat, to death, to rest, to rebirth every single year. The sun moves in a predictable pattern, in a rhythm. Nature moves to a rhythm. God, therefore, created nature to live in rhythm, but he also created us as his people to live in rhythms. There's a reason that we as humans are so good at recognizing patterns. It's a fundamental part of our physiology. Recognizing patterns is just rhythm forming. It's finding rhythms. If you look in the Old Testament, kind of the first part of the Bible, God gave his people, the Hebrew people, the Israelites, he gave his people a rhythmic way of living. And you're going to hear me talk like this a lot tonight because I'm a musician and rhythm is so important to musicians. But even outside of that, rhythm has been important since the dawn of creation. Look at the Hebrew people. God spent 6 days of creation and 1 day of rest. He created everything in 6 days, and he rested a day. He creates for 6 days, and he rests for a day. And he tells us to do the same 6 days of work, 1 day of rest. And that day of rest is called the Sabbath, the Shabbat. And one of the things that kind of broke that work-Sabbath rhythm that God had instituted was when the Israelites were being enslaved in Egypt, in the book of Exodus, towards the end of the book of Genesis, the very first book of the Bible, and on into the second. And there's about 450 years where Israel is actually enslaved by Egypt. And they're told no longer to do the 6 days of work, 1 day of rest. Now they're told to make bricks and to work for 7 days. There is no breaks. There is no rest. There is no rhythm to their life other than work. They are valued by their output. They are valued by how many bricks they can make at the end of the day. And if not, they're going to get whipped. And God restores that rhythm by commanding that the Sabbath is instituted again after Israel escapes Egypt. And not only is the Sabbath to be celebrated every 7 days, this day of rest, this rhythmic kind of way of being, not only that, but he institutes 7 festivals to celebrate 7 different landmarks of life throughout the year. And, he institutes this kind of big giant party to get together and worship God 7 different times every single year. This is instituted not just to like make sure that they can all have a party and give gifts and do all these other things. This is to remember. This is to show them that they are more than what they are producing, that they are a people of God. There's a rhythm to these festivals, and these rhythmic festivals and Sabbath. This is good. This is created as a good thing. But as humans do, we tend to exert our own control over something that's good. We do this all the time. And the thing that's good gets ruined. And that's where we are today. We believe that rhythms are instilled in all of us. We can feel that, but we've messed it all up. And we've turned something that was inherently good, like worshiping God weekly on a Sabbath, into something that is oppressive and religious. And I think the best way to look at this is to look at the example of Jesus. I mean, that's the best way to look at most things, but especially in this. And towards the beginning of his public ministry, Jesus turns 30 and he starts his public ministry. And at that time, in ancient history, the city of Jerusalem, which we've talked about a ton, the city of Jerusalem was the center of all things in the Jewish faith and the Israelite way of doing things. It was the center of the faith and the worship. It's where the giant temple was. And Jerusalem had been conquered by the Roman Empire. But the Romans really wanted nothing to do with the way that the Israelites practiced their faith. They just kind of said, hey, this is this backwater area. Like, we just want you for your resources. I don't care how you worship. Just continue to pay us money and continue to let us exert political control and military control over you. And so into that void of kind of religious control, there's 2 major Jewish sects that step into this. You have the Pharisees and you have the Sadducees. Now, the Sadducees are primarily a wealthy group of people. They're primarily like they've made a lot of money, and they're looking to gain political influence through their church so that they can influence the Roman Empire. They believe that if they can influence the Roman Empire, that God is going to be done well, and yada, yada, yada. Now, probably there was some like buying, and there's probably a little bit of irony there and probably a lot of corruption. And that's the Sadducees. But then we have the Pharisees. And the Pharisees are kind of derided throughout the entire Bible. And there's a reason for that. The Pharisees hold these strict views as to their interpretations of the Hebrew Bible, and these strict views of things like Sabbath and tithing and food restrictions and rest, even how you had to wash your hands before you could eat and who you could hang out with. They interpreted the Hebrew Bible to be so legalistically rigorous that they had to form man-made systems in place just to make sure that these things were going to be structured and be upheld. It was incredibly rigorous, and it was what many people think of when they think of that word church and religion. They think of strict and punishing, and that was the way that the Pharisees lived. They had a strict and punishing system. They were going to glorify God by keeping every little dot and iota of the law. That's what they were going to do. And into this kind of void, Jesus walks in his public ministry. And you got to think, Jesus has spent a little bit of time walking around the countryside of Judea outside of Jerusalem. He's been ministering out there. He's kind of called his first couple of disciples. He's not walking around with his 12 at this point. He's been eating with a few, so-called sinners, and he's been forgiving people in the name of God. He's been walking way more than he should on a Sabbath day, and he's been bucking the trends of fasting that have been sent by the Pharisees towards him. He's been doing things that are not the ways of the Jewish religion at the time. He's been following a system, but it's not the same system that the Pharisees seem to have been following. And so people are confused, but they're also angry, like super angry at Jesus. And so in Mark chapter 3, the book of Mark, the second of Jesus's 4 biographies, Matthew and Mark, in Mark chapter 3, we see kind of this confrontation. We're going to read starting at the beginning of Mark chapter 3. It says, Jesus went into the synagogue again, and he noticed a man with a deformed hand. Now, since it was the Sabbath, Jesus' enemies watched him closely. If he healed the man's hand, they planned to accuse him of working on the Sabbath. And Jesus said to the man with the deformed hand, "Come and stand in front of everyone." And then he turned to his critics. Does the law permit good deeds on the Sabbath, or is it a day for doing evil? Is this a day to save a life or to destroy it? But they wouldn't answer him. And he looked around at them angrily, and he was deeply saddened by their hard hearts. And then he said to the man, hold out your hand. And so the man held out his hand, and it was restored. And all at once the Pharisees went away, and they met with the supporters of Herod to plot how to kill Jesus. So let's paint a picture together, shall we? We're going to do a little Bob Ross with some happy little trees, maybe some angry little Pharisees. So we've got this Sabbath day. It's this holy day. It's this day that the Pharisees were overly strict about, and they gather at the synagogue to worship, kind of like church. And now you have to know there are 39 different rules about the Sabbath day. 39 rules. Like, you're not allowed to carry anything in public. That's a real rule on the Sabbath. Or you're not allowed to burn anything on the Sabbath. That's a real rule. You couldn't write anything down. You couldn't erase anything. You could only walk a small amount, and you definitely could not harvest your garden. You weren't allowed to work. You had to follow this religious system set up here, or you'd be literally kicked out of the synagogue for working, for burning something. You could be kicked out of the synagogue, and the synagogue was the way of life. That was your church. That was your family and your friends. It was where you bought things and you sold things. It was your home base. It was your market. And if you were kicked out of the synagogue, you would have to literally start your entire life over again, and you would not have that support system. And Jesus comes walking in to the synagogue. And in this congregation of people, there's a man with a deformed hand sitting there. And that hand, you got to think, he's got a deformed hand, and that has to affect every single aspect of this man's life. And instead of being the center of compassion here at this synagogue, this man now becomes the center of a spiritual trap. We've got the religious leaders in this picture, the angry little Pharisees, and they're watching Jesus like a hawk. Their hearts are not concerned with that man's suffering and his way of life. They're more focused on catching Jesus, breaking one of those 39 Sabbath laws so they could kick him out of the synagogue and not have to worry about him ever again. This day of rest and restoration is now turning into a day of accusation. But Jesus turns to the Pharisees, and he does something remarkable. He could have said to the man, hey, dude, meet me after the sun goes down, so we're not breaking any Sabbath laws, and meet me outside, and then I could heal you. He could have done that, and that would have been well within his right as the Son of God. But instead, he looks around, and he says, come and stand in front of everyone. Hey, we're not going to hide this. We're going to show everybody what's going on. And then he asks this sort of piercing question. Does the law permit good deeds on the Sabbath? Is it just a day to follow rules and let people continue to suffer? Is that what the Sabbath is? And there's this deafening silence that now washes over our picture together. The religious leaders can't answer. The Pharisees can't answer because I think deep down they know the truth, that they've replaced in their heart of hearts a thing that was supposed to be part of God's rhythm. They've replaced the Sabbath with a legalistic bunch of rules. They have now built up their own religion with their kind of structure. This is not God's rhythm. This is their own rhythm. And Jesus looks around at them, and he is sad, but he's also angry. And I read this as more than just frustration. It's like a divine heartbreak. Like Jesus' heart is truly breaking. Like when he looks at a dead Lazarus and he weeps. It's kind of has that same feeling. They're missing God's purpose for the Sabbath entirely. And they think they're doing the right thing by keeping the rules, but they're serving this system, but the system is already broken in the first place, and so they have no idea which way is up. Just like my air conditioning, I even if I kept changing out the air filters and making sure that everything was working, and I was cleaning the white snot slime out of the pipes, even if I'm doing that, but the system is shooting hot air into my house, the system's broken. Right? I've been doing all of the right things. My rhythms of maintenance are happening. The things I'm doing are supposed to be, they're happening, but it's not doing the system any good. And worse, it's actually hurting me because now it's hot in my house, and hot houses in Florida are the worst. And time and again, Jesus is confronted by the Pharisees all throughout the Gospels. All throughout the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And at each time, he essentially says the same thing. The heart of God is not legalism. The heart of God is not legalism. It's not strict adherence to rules that don't serve. The heart of God is compassion. and love and justice and mercy and sacrifice and giving. This is the heart of God. The kingdom that Jesus comes to tell everyone about, God's kingdom, the kingdom that we now are trying to live into, that kingdom is not formed on rigid rules. It's formed on a rhythm of grace. It's formed on this movement of forgiveness. It prioritizes human need and dignity and worth. And Jesus looks at that group of Pharisees on the Sabbath day, and he prioritizes that man's dignity, and he heals him. That's what Jesus does. Jesus' devotion to God leads him to healing and love, and I think our devotion to God should lead to love and acts of kindness. And it should lead to acceptance, not to just rules and religion. And I think a lot of us tonight here have that same feeling about that word religion because we associate it with church immediately, and then we just shut down. I'm the same way. We've been hurt by churches that are full of people that would much rather hold true to rules and regulations out of some misguided devotion to God or to budgets or to filling checkbooks or to making sure we get butts and seats, when in reality it goes much, much deeper than something just written on a page or in a bylaw. That's what all of this is. It goes much, much deeper than just the page there. These churches, these quote unquote religions, they fail to see us. They fail to see our lives as valuable, or even worse, they're just failing to see us at all. They're overlooking us because we can't pay enough. We're not doing enough. We're not giving enough. We're not sacrificing enough. We are not upholding their religious system. And they're forcing people like us who are trying to ask this question of what does it mean to live in a rhythm more than a religion. They're forcing us out into the margin, and they're making us feel like spiritual outcasts. And don't get me wrong, no, we have religious practices here at Lux. We do. We have it's called a liturgy. Every church has a liturgy. Liturgy is just really like a fancy way of saying this is the way we typically do things. That's all liturgy is. We have our habits. That's what it is. But I'd like to think that we don't let our liturgy control our congregation. We don't think the way we typically do things is going to control what happens in our Discord server or in our messages. I mean, I know the internet is like falling down right now, and guess what? We're still here. I still want to love on you. I still want to preach this message. I think you need to hear this message. And by the way, you're still here. You're still here. We're not allowing the liturgy of like, broken internet, I guess we're going to leave and do the thing. No. We're not allowing that. We're allowing God's grace and mercy and peace and his justice and humility to speak into this evening. And I'd like to think that we're doing that all throughout Lux, not just here when the internet is falling apart, but all throughout every single thing we do at Lux Digital Church. But I think we also need to take this outside of just blaming, the big bad church or religion and just, Christianity and the religious right and all these other things. And we need to take this outside of that. And I want to make this just a little bit more personal right now. And I need to ask you, is the way you're doing things right now, is it bringing life? And is it bringing you closer to God's heart? Are the things that you're doing bringing you life and bringing you closer to God's heart? Or are they leaving you tired and worn out and beat up and sad and feeling sorry for yourself and leaving you with negativity? Jesus speaks directly to that with one of my favorite passages ever in all of Scripture, found in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. And there's a bunch of different translations of this passage. There really is. There's a bunch of different translations of every Bible passage, but here's the one that really gets to the heart of it. It's found in the Message paraphrase of the Bible. And so we're going to put that up on the screen, and I want to read it. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. And Jesus says to the crowd around him, he says, "Look, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn how to live freely and lightly," which sounds awesome. Now, there's that phrase in there, the unforced rhythms of grace. The unforced rhythms of grace. That is like the opposite of what we think about when we think of religion. Unforced rhythms of grace. Jesus is demonstrating an unforced rhythm of grace in the synagogue with that man. He's not forcing a new religious way upon him. He's not forcing him to give him 15 shekels and then make sure his hand will get healed. He's simply saying, look, this is the better way. Following me, trusting that I do know what I'm talking about, especially on the Sabbath day, healing and doing good instead of evil on the Sabbath day. This is the better way. And Jesus is telling us right now, right here, that we need to take responsibility for our rhythms. That's what he's telling us. He's telling us that we need to learn about Jesus and we need to improve our own systems, that we need to make our churches and our gatherings of people better. We need to do these things. We need to do these things. We need to take personal responsibility for these things because those crowds of people living around Jesus, they had spent their lives living under rules and regulations of a religious system that cared more about keeping the law than establishing a relationship with the God of the universe. But Jesus doesn't just say, okay, be rebels and throw out all of the church stuff and all of the religious systems and they're all bad. He doesn't say that to us and to them. No. He says, look to me. He says, follow me. He says, watch me, and I will teach you what it means to be a church. I will teach you what it means to be one who loves people. I will teach you what it means to be compassionate and kind. I will teach you what it means to live freely, and I will show you how to have a rhythm, not just a religion. Because Jesus wants to know you. He wants to walk with you. Because following Jesus means to follow someone who loves you, who wants to connect with you, and who wants to form a relationship with you. He doesn't want to give you a rule book. It's not just following a bunch of rules, because honestly, it's easier to keep rules than it is to form a relationship. It's super simple to check off a bunch of things each and every day and go, cool, I did it. I'm a Christian. It's a lot tougher to form relationships because relationships are messy, incredibly messy. So what, right? So like, what does this mean for us today? I mean, we're not planning the death of a man named Jesus. We're not the Pharisees in that story. But I think a lot of us right now, we're caught in some of the same traps that the Pharisees were. We're chasing rules or structures to save us when we need to be chasing a relationship with Jesus. We're looking to blame inefficient systems and we're looking to blame governments and institutions when all they're going to do is just take from us and leave us depleted and exhausted. And I think a lot of us feel that just plain exhaustion right now, and we don't know what to do about it to get out of that rut. We don't know how to do that. We keep feeling like we're chasing religion without a relationship. We're sitting in an empty church without Jesus. I think a lot of people feel that in our lives right now. And I think it's pretty interesting that we're all drawn to a place like Lux right now, where we're trying to keep this rhythm is greater than religion core value intact week in and week out. And I'm going to be honest, I've never been part of a church. I've been a pastor for a very, very long time, like 15 years, but I've been in church for a very, very long time. I've never been part of a church that prioritizes healthy balances of work, rest, refreshment, and real and honest relationship like we do here. I've been here for about 2.5 years, and I've been working on staff for about 1.5 years, and I have to tell you that this has been a real time of healing for me. This is not a therapy session. Hopefully you're going to understand where I'm going here. This is going to sound like super cheesy, but I do a word every year that I organize all my thoughts and plans around. This year that word is energy, but last year that word was healing, and that's what I wrote in my journals, was healing. And I'm okay. Let's just be honest. Like everyone on the other side of this stream and anyone who can hear my voice, whether on podcast or on demand, you have really restored my viewpoint of what a church can actually be. You all have. You've been a big part about that healing. Because, like, honestly, for about 14 years before finding Lux, I was stuck in that rule-keeping, grace-abandoning way of doing religion. I was stuck there. I was stuck making sure that I was checking all of the boxes to be a good Christian boy. I was a professional pastor, but I was an amateur Christian. That's what I was. But over this past year, I've really been trying to embrace that rhythm is greater than religion mentality. And I've been seeing that healing can actually come when I lean into the rhythms that Jesus has already set up for me and has set up in this church. And in this past year, there's been a real sense of walking in freedom, taking that invitation that Jesus gives in Matthew chapter 11. I've been taking his yoke of rhythmic love and grace upon me to restore to my soul. And I want to invite you into this process with me. There's a couple of simple steps to do this. It's actually kind of simple, but it's going to overtake your life. And so there's really 3 steps, because I'm a pastor. There's always 3 steps to everything. And the first one is to prioritize rest. And that sounds stupid. But you need to set aside a day each week to just stop working. Seriously, I know it's stupid when the world tells us to go and create and earn. That's what we have to do. But you just need to take a day and do the things that rejuvenate you and your soul. If you have kids and other responsibilities, I get that it might be tough, but in that case, like, prioritize bits and pieces of the day, of each day, not just like one day, but of each day then, where you're not constantly filling up that time with sound or pictures or TikTok when it's not banned, or Instagram or Facebook or whatever we're doing. Just take a few minutes to stop, to breathe. Prioritize that. Make it a priority. And then number 2 is to engage with God. And even if it is just for 5 or 10 minutes, even if you have to force yourself to do that, even if it's in that moment of rest, engage with God. Pray. Just open up your mind to God and just say, hey, God, here's what's going on. Read scripture. Join us for the Bible in 1 year plan on the Bible app right now, which has been going awesome, by the way. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Keep going with that. It's been awesome. Go put on a Spotify playlist full of songs about God. Annika in the chat right now, she's got a playlist that she's been bumping for the last 2 years. We talked about it at our worship team meeting last night. She's been listening to the same playlist for like 7 years in a row. Go ask her to give her your playlist, something. Give 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes a day with God is better than no time at all. It allows God to set our pace for us. It allows us to slow us down and to believe that the ways of God are better when we actually connect with him. So that's number 1, prioritize rest. Number 2, engage with God. And number 3, this has been the biggest one of all for me. Don't get trapped. Don't let those first 2 things, prioritizing rest and engaging with God, don't let them become traps. Don't feel bad if you can't prioritize rest for that day or that week, because that's what religion does to you. It puts you in the shame spiral when you can't do the thing, and then you just end up worse than where you were before. You need to identify areas in your spiritual life where legalism has crept in. Start thinking about the traditions that you do in your church life, in your Christian life. Are there traditions or expectations that leave you feeling that shame, that leave you feeling heavy and ill-fitting all the time when you don't follow them? Are you looking at church as a whole, and are you seeing only rules and regulations? Are you holding yourself to a schedule that you're never going to be able to keep? Through prayer and through places like our community and through prioritizing rest, seek some guidance, have some conversations, like let's talk. Our DMs are always open. Seek some guidance to kind of start letting go of some of those legalistic principles, but then you need to embrace God's grace-filled rhythm by prioritizing rest and engaging with him. Because what Jesus is calling us to as a church and as a community, this kind of rhythm is greater than religion value. It's not about perfect attendance. It's not about adherence to some flawless performance in life. That's not what it's about. It's not about being the perfect. It's about a depth of love and an understanding that you're human, that he's God, and that we are loved infinitely by him. That's actually our why it matters statement today. The one thing I kind of want you to leave from our time today. Our why it matters is this: rhythm is greater than religion. It's about a system of understanding. It's a system of understanding how deeply we're loved. At the very core of it, that's what this is. That man with the deformed hand, he experienced firsthand the difference between rhythm and religion. He experienced love. He experienced grace and mercy and truth, just like that. Religion would have left him waiting forever, but rhythm restored him immediately. And today, Jesus is extending that same invitation to you. He's saying, come to me, learn the unforced rhythms of grace. Learn how to shuck those rigid constraints of religion. Learn how to step into the life-giving flow of God's rhythm. Learn how to prioritize time with him. Learn how to prioritize how to engage with him. And most importantly, learn how to build your systems around the established rhythm that Jesus already has in your life. Let's pray and hope that the internet holds up the rest of the time here. Jesus, thank you for allowing us to be yours. Thank you for your deep, deep love. And God, we are filled with gratitude, but we're also filled with like this weird non-understanding, Lord. Help us to take a step back and look at our lives as if we were in the third person, looking at a subject, at a science project almost. God, help us to identify those areas that we're holding on to these legalistic principles. Help us to see those places that we cannot really step into your rhythm fully, God, and help us to move past those. Jesus, show us how to embrace rest, how to prioritize engaging with you throughout this week, God. And most importantly, help us to see that rhythm is greater than religion in your kingdom. For your kingdom is where we want to be. It's in Jesus' name we pray, and all of God's people say, amen.
How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that he would give his only Son to make a wretch his treasure. How great the pain of searing loss, the Father turned his face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one, bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon the cross, my sin upon his shoulders. Ashamed, I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. 'Cause it was my sin that held him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. I will not boast in anything, no gifts, no power, no wisdom, but I will boast in Jesus Christ, his death and resurrection. What should I gain from his reward? But I cannot give an answer. But this I know with all my heart, his wounds have paid my ransom. Why should I gain from his reward? I cannot give an answer. But this I know with all my heart, his wounds have paid my ransom.